Monday, 15 January 1944. In the cold gray light of an English winter morning, senior Allied commanders wrestled with decisions that would determine the fate of Western Europe. The cross-channel invasion of Nazi-occupied France, codenamed Operation Overlord, was no longer a theoretical ambition, but a fixed commitment, tentatively scheduled for late spring. Troop concentrations across southern England had reached unprecedented levels. Landing craft production was being counted by the week. Air forces were systematically dismantling German rail networks in northern France. Yet amid this visible preparation lay a less visible, equally vital struggle: the battle to deceive the German high command about where and when the blow would fall. At the center of that deception stood one of the most controversial and dynamic figures in the Allied command structure, George S. Patton, whose reputation would become a weapon long before his tanks ever rolled onto French soil. By January 1944, Patton's military career had already been marked by both brilliance and scandal. His rapid armored exploitation during the North African campaign had demonstrated an operational aggressiveness that impressed some and alarmed others. His performance during the Sicilian campaign further cemented his reputation for speed and relentless pressure. But the infamous slapping incidents in Sicily had temporarily sidelined him, forcing the Allied high command to consider not only his battlefield utility, but also the political implications of his behavior. As preparations intensified for the invasion of France, the Allies faced a strategic dilemma: how to use Patton's aggressive image without granting him direct command of the initial assault. If you appreciate detailed historical analysis like this, subscribe to support this channel, because understanding these decisions requires examining not only battlefield tactics, but also the strategic calculations that shaped them. The Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, Dwight D. Eisenhower, recognized that Patton's name carried weight far beyond Allied circles. German intelligence had come to regard Patton as the Allies' most formidable field commander. Reports filtered through neutral channels and espionage networks suggested that elements within the German high command viewed him as the logical choice to lead any major offensive. This perception created an opportunity. Rather than suppressing Patton's visibility, the Allies could amplify it in the wrong place. In doing so, they could manipulate German defensive deployments before the first landing craft touched French sand. The deception plan that would eventually encompass Patton formed part of a broader Allied strategy known as Operation Bodyguard. Bodyguard was designed to mislead the German high command regarding the timing and location of the main invasion. Within it, a key sub-operation, Operation Fortitude, focused on convincing Germany that the principal Allied assault would strike not in Normandy, but in the Pas-de-Calais region, the narrowest point between Britain and France. Pas-de-Calais presented an obvious target from a geographical perspective, and German planners expected the Allies to favor the shortest crossing, reinforcing that expectation would tie down critical German divisions far from the actual landing zones. Patton's assignment to command the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, or FUSAG, represented one of the boldest elements of Fortitude. FUSAG existed largely on paper, supported by dummy equipment, controlled radio traffic, and carefully staged troop movements. Inflatable tanks dotted fields in southeastern England. Wooden aircraft silhouettes populated fake airfields. Engineers constructed false supply depots visible to aerial reconnaissance. Radio operators transmitted messages simulating the chatter of entire corps-level formations. German intelligence intercepts recorded these signals and reported them upward, reinforcing the illusion of a massive army poised opposite Pas-de-Calais. The decision to place Patton at the head of this phantom formation was not accidental. German assessments consistently identified him as the Allies' most aggressive and capable armored commander. By associating Patton with FUSAG, the Allies increased the credibility of the deception. If Patton commanded forces in southeastern England, German planners reasoned, then that concentration likely represented the main effort. The psychological dimension of this maneuver cannot be overstated. In war, perception often shapes deployment more than reality. The German High Command's fear of Patton amplified the effectiveness of every dummy tank and every falsified signal. While Patton publicly maintained the posture of a field commander preparing for invasion, the true operational control of the Normandy assault fell to other Allied leaders. The ground forces designated for the initial landings would operate under the 21st Army Group commanded by Bernard Montgomery. The American First Army, under Omar Bradley, would oversee U.S. beach operations. Eisenhower retained overall strategic authority. Patton's exclusion from immediate command reflected both political caution and operational calculation. Allied leadership understood that his temperament, though effective in exploitation phases, required careful oversight during politically sensitive operations. Throughout the winter and early spring of 1944, Allied air forces intensified their bombing campaign across northern France. Rail yards, bridges, and communication hubs were systematically targeted to isolate the future battlefield. The German response reflected uncertainty. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, assigned to oversee the Atlantic Wall defenses, argued that the invasion must be defeated at the beaches. He believed Allied air superiority would prevent effective German counterattacks inland. Meanwhile, other German commanders, including Gerd von Rundstedt, favored holding armored reserves deeper in France to launch a coordinated counterstroke once the main landing point was identified. This internal disagreement within the German command structure magnified the importance of accurate intelligence and made them vulnerable to deception. The Allied deception apparatus extended beyond physical decoys. Double agents played a critical role. The British-run double-cross system fed carefully crafted misinformation to German intelligence. Among the most significant of these agents was the Spaniard known by the codename Garbo, whose fabricated network of subagents reported detailed but misleading observations. These reports reinforced the narrative that FUSAG represented the principal invasion force. German intelligence assessments, filtered through layers of bureaucratic confirmation bias, increasingly aligned with Allied intentions. By early May 1944, the scale of Allied troop concentration in southern England reached its peak. Landing craft assembled in sheltered harbors. Paratroopers rehearsed night drops. Engineers refined beach obstacle clearance procedures. The logistical complexity of Overlord defied precedent. Supplying hundreds of thousands of men across a contested coastline required innovations such as the Mulberry Artificial Harbors and the Pluto Pipeline Project. Every aspect of the invasion plan carried risk. Weather patterns in the English Channel remained unpredictable. German coastal artillery positions were formidable. Minefields and underwater obstacles threatened catastrophic losses. Within this atmosphere of mounting tension, Patton's visible presence in southeastern England continued to serve its deceptive purpose. German aerial reconnaissance occasionally captured images of what appeared to be extensive armored concentrations near Dover. Intercepted radio traffic confirmed the existence of large headquarters elements. From Berlin's perspective, the evidence aligned logically. The Allies would strike where geography favored them most, and they would entrust the decisive blow to their most aggressive general. On 5 June 1944, deteriorating weather forced Eisenhower and his commanders to confront the possibility of delay. Meteorological forecasts suggested a brief window of improved conditions on 6 June. The decision to proceed required balancing uncertainty against momentum. Postponement would disrupt troop morale and risk compromising secrecy. Proceeding under marginal weather conditions risked disaster at sea. Eisenhower ultimately authorized the invasion, accepting responsibility for the consequences. In the early hours of 6 June 1944, Allied airborne divisions descended upon Normandy. Amphibious forces approached 5 designated beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. German defenses responded with fierce resistance, particularly at Omaha Beach, where American casualties mounted rapidly. Yet even as the landings unfolded, German high command hesitated to commit its full armored reserves. The belief that Normandy might represent a diversion persisted. Intelligence reports continued to warn of Patton's FUSAG, poised opposite Pas-de-Calais. The success of the initial landings owed much to this hesitation. Critical panzer divisions remained in reserve, awaiting confirmation of the main Allied thrust. Hitler himself, influenced by intelligence assessments and the fear of a secondary landing, delayed authorization for full deployment. Hours lost on 6 June could never be recovered. The Allies established footholds that would expand despite heavy casualties. In the days following D-Day, German intelligence continued to anticipate a larger assault in the Pas-de-Calais region. Even as Allied forces consolidated their positions in Normandy, the phantom threat of Patton's army group constrained German redeployment. Divisions that might have reinforced Normandy remained stationed further north. The deception had achieved its objective. It fixed German forces in place during the invasion's most vulnerable phase. Patton himself would not set foot in Normandy until July 1944, when he assumed command of the U.S. Third Army following the breakout from the beachhead. By then, the deception's primary purpose had been fulfilled. Operation Fortitude had delayed German concentration of force long enough to ensure the invasion's survival. Patton's aggressive operational style would soon find expression in the rapid exploitation across France, but his hidden role before D-Day proved equally consequential. The strategic brilliance of assigning Patton to a fictitious command lay in its understanding of enemy psychology. German planners, shaped by years of warfare against dynamic Allied commanders, sought patterns and reputations to guide their expectations. Patton's earlier campaigns in North Africa and Sicily had established a narrative of relentless offensive spirit. By manipulating that narrative, Allied planners transformed reputation into a strategic asset. This hidden role underscores a broader truth about World War II. Victory depended not only on material superiority, but also on the management of information, perception, and timing. The pressure upon Allied leadership in early 1944 extended beyond logistical preparation. They faced the challenge of orchestrating a deception so convincing that it altered enemy deployment without revealing itself prematurely. A single intelligence failure or careless disclosure could have unraveled months of preparation. German defensive doctrine, shaped by both Rommel's forward defense philosophy and Rundstedt's preference for centralized reserves, proved vulnerable to ambiguity. The Atlantic Wall, though formidable on paper, lacked sufficient depth to repel a fully coordinated assault without rapid armored reinforcement. The Allies understood that their survival on D-Day depended on buying time measured not in days, but in hours. Every hour that German armored divisions remained stationary due to uncertainty increased the probability of Allied consolidation. By mid-June 1944, as fighting intensified in the Norman bocage, German commanders gradually recognized that the Normandy landings represented the main Allied effort. Yet even then, elements of doubt lingered. The continued existence of FUSAG in German intelligence assessments delayed the full transfer of forces. It was not until weeks later that the deception fully dissipated. In that crucial interim, Allied forces expanded their beachhead, secured vital ports, and prepared for breakout operations. The operational breakout in late July, enabled by concentrated American offensives and massive aerial bombardment, unleashed Patton's Third Army across Brittany and into the heart of France. His rapid advances validated the aggressive image that had been leveraged months earlier for deception. Yet the irony remains that before his tanks achieved operational freedom, his greatest contribution to Overlord had been his absence from the beaches, and his presence in the shadows of a phantom army. The hidden dimension of Patton's role before D-Day reveals how Allied planners integrated personality, intelligence, and strategic necessity. War at this scale demanded coordination across air, land, sea, and information domains. Decisions taken in quiet English headquarters rooms reverberated across the beaches of Normandy. The tension between visibility and secrecy defined the months leading to 6 June 1944, and within that tension, Patton's reputation became a deliberate instrument of war. As Allied forces pressed inland through June and July, the consequences of German miscalculation became increasingly apparent. Divisions held back in Pas-de-Calais could not retroactively influence the outcome at Omaha or Utah. The initial hesitation compounded logistical strain within the German command system. Rail networks damaged by Allied bombing hindered rapid redeployment. Air superiority restricted daylight movement. The interplay between deception and operational pressure demonstrated the cumulative effect of coordinated strategy. The Normandy invasion stands as one of the most meticulously planned operations in military history. Yet its success hinged upon human judgment under uncertainty. Eisenhower's decision to proceed on 6 June reflected acceptance of incomplete information. German commanders' delay in committing reserves reflected their own interpretation of uncertain intelligence. Patton's secret plan, his leadership of an army that did not exist, functioned within this environment of doubt, shaping decisions without firing a shot. The broader strategic context of early 1944 included Soviet advances on the Eastern Front, where German forces faced mounting pressure. The opening of a Western front through Overlord would stretch German resources to breaking point. Allied planners recognized that synchronizing pressure across multiple theaters would accelerate Germany's collapse. Deception operations ensured that, when the Western Front opened, it would do so with maximum surprise and minimum German preparedness. In examining Patton's hidden role before D-Day, it becomes clear that military success often depends upon restraint as much as aggression. Patton, known for his impatience and offensive spirit, accepted a temporary role that limited his immediate battlefield involvement. That acceptance reflected both his understanding of broader strategic necessity and Eisenhower's capacity to manage strong personalities within a coalition command structure. Coalition warfare introduced additional complexity. British and American strategic priorities did not always align seamlessly. The allocation of landing zones, command hierarchies, and resource distribution required negotiation and compromise. Patton's assignment to FUSAG also served to reassure British leadership that the initial invasion would proceed under carefully balanced command arrangements. Managing alliance cohesion represented an invisible yet critical component of Overlord's preparation. The interplay of pressure, uncertainty, and consequence defined every aspect of the pre-invasion months. Allied intelligence analysts scrutinized German troop movements for signs of detection. German intelligence officers assessed Allied radio traffic for confirmation of their assumptions. Both sides operated within imperfect information environments. The ultimate outcome depended not solely on strength of arms, but on interpretation of signals. By the time Patton's Third Army surged across France in August 1944, the foundations of that advance had been laid months earlier through deception. The success of Fortitude and Bodyguard demonstrated that modern warfare demanded mastery of narrative as well as firepower. Patton's secret plan before D-Day illustrates how leadership reputation can transcend battlefield presence, influencing enemy calculations in ways that shape entire campaigns. The events of January through June 1944 reveal a strategic choreography in which visible preparation masked invisible intent. Dummy tanks, false radio transmissions, and carefully orchestrated public appearances formed part of a coherent system designed to manipulate enemy perception. Patton's role within that system, underscores the sophistication of Allied planning and the delicate balance between transparency within one's own ranks and opacity toward the enemy. As Allied forces continued their advance through late summer 1944, the long-term consequences of German misjudgment became undeniable. The failure to counter the Normandy landings decisively marked the beginning of sustained German retreat in the West. The deception that shielded Overlord during its most vulnerable phase thus contributed directly to the liberation of Western Europe. In understanding the hidden role of Patton before D-Day, one must appreciate the convergence of personality, intelligence, logistics, and strategic foresight. The pressure bearing down upon Allied leadership in early 1944 left no margin for error. Every decision carried potential catastrophe. That the deception succeeded reflects not inevitability, but disciplined coordination under extraordinary uncertainty, with Patton's name and presence serving as a carefully positioned piece on the vast strategic chessboard of World War II.